I have a pretty minimal role keeping time and so forth. The main thing I need to do, though, is to calibrate expectations. This is an academic session, so it's going to be much nerdier than the last session. And the three papers are on sort of two broad topics. The first paper, as you can see from the title, is going to continue the issues around gender, and the other two papers are about, well, frankly, they're about money. So maybe without any further ado, Will, do you want to come up and do the first paper? Let's take it away.
Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Will Donnelly, and I'm here to present Why Aren't Women Rocking? Gender Disparities in Music Festival Lineups. I completed this paper as my senior honors thesis at Cornell University. So a quick roadmap of what I'm going to go over in this presentation is why I conducted this research, the design of my archival component, the results of my archival component, the design of my experimental portion, the results of the experimental portion, and then a brief discussion on the conclusions I've drawn and areas for future research. So at Cornell, I was the executive director of the Concert Commission. And like a lot of program boards at a lot of universities, we were tasked with booking the artists that played for students on campus. And at the end of my one-year board term, my advisor asked me, you realize you booked only male artists over the last year. My advisor was a female, and my board was half female, and we're college kids on a pretty liberal campus. So we didn't really think of ourselves as part of the problem in the music industry with relation to gender bias. But looking back, it had been almost exclusively male acts that we had booked throughout the year. So I started to do a little research, and there seemed to be a lot of press on this. And I mean a lot of press on this. And it keeps going. But clearly, there was a problem. This is a chart that I pulled from a Pitchfork article that came out last year, where they took 15 of the largest music festivals and gender-coded their lineups. As you can see, 74% of the artists across those 15 festivals were exclusively male. And I actually compared that to the percentages we had booked at the Concert Commission, and they were nearly identical. And most of these articles talk specifically about music festivals. And we at the Concert Commission were in a music festival. And it got me thinking, why is it that festivals specifically draw so much of this attention? And my hypothesis is it's because they act as really good convenience samples. First of all, you have an easy to digest number of acts. Most festivals book around 150 acts, which makes it easy to do a cutoff. It's a nice, chewable chunk of artists rather than having a look at the whole ecosystem. Additionally, you've got varying levels of popularity, from the mega headliners who play to the sold-out crowds late at night, to the up-and-coming bands that play at noon when half of the attendees are too hungover from the day before to even be there on time. Additionally, it cuts across many genres that compose contemporary popular music. You're not looking specifically at one rock club or one hip-hop club. So you get a little bit of a flavor of the different genres. And so for these three reasons, I think the festivals drew so much attention. But the question is it really a festival problem? Though they've drawn that much press, I wasn't convinced that it was related specifically to them, because we at the Concert Commission had the same problem. So before beginning the research, I had three hypotheses on what could potentially drive this gender imbalance. The first one was, are more festival attendees male? If 74% of attendees at festivals were male, that could potentially explain the difference. First of all, no they aren't. Without having to do any experiments of my own, the data pretty clearly shows that festival attendees are almost equally balanced. And some festivals like Coachella actually have more female attendees than male. Additionally, as you'll see later in my research from the experimental portion, there was no relationship shown whatsoever that male artists necessarily prefer male artists or females necessarily prefer female artists. That was also mentioned in the previous panel. So the other two questions were much more difficult to answer and sort of formed the crux of the research that I did. The first one was, are festival lineups more unbalanced than agency rosters in terms of their gender composition? At the Concert Commission, we booked through major talent agencies, and it felt to us very similar to ordering dinner off of a menu. That the rosters that these agencies maintained would be a menu of options available to the festival bookers. If that menu was just as skewed as the festival lineups that they were putting out, that would gain an important insight into gender imbalances in the music industry. The third question that I believe was asked of the previous panel was, is there a widely held public preference for male acts? As you can see, Coachella, Lollapalooza, they're selling out. even with these 74% male acts, there doesn't really seem to be a market force keeping them in check. So is it that there is a genuine or constructed, widely held preference for male artists? And I answered that question through my experimental research. So for the archival research and the agency breakdowns, I coded 5 agencies. The 5 agencies I coded were WME, Paradigm, Billions, UTA, and CAA. These were the 5 that I was most familiar with through the Concert Commission and through brief internships in the industry. Given the 1-year temporal span of the honors thesis, there were more I could have done. ICM partners probably would have been next, and you can go on ad infinitum. But these 5 really represent the majority of acts that play at the major festivals like Lollapalooza and Coachella. And so I coded them for gender. I had 3 conditions: male, female, and mixed. No weight was given to specific instrumentation or percentages within bands. You had to be exclusively male or female to fall into those conditions. Additionally, given the sheer number of acts, over 5,000 acts were coded as part of my research, and the number of members within acts, gender and sex were assumed to be the same unless materials specifically stated otherwise. Additionally, I did sort of a secondary coding of genre. Now, the genres that I sort of arbitrarily chose to code were pop, rock, electronic, hip-hop, and alternative. I would consider the research, the typology of the gender, to be much more definitive than I would the genre. I would really only look at this as a way to understand gender issues on music festival lineups, because which specific act, which specific genre the acts fell into was, again, somewhat arbitrary, as you saw in the survey that began the presentation. That many of them consider themselves multi-genre. I could have included R&B, folk, or other genres in this typology, but as you'll see later, it's really a good way to think about the gender issues. So here are the results. Over the 5,000 acts, these are the gender percentages of major talent agencies. The black is the percentage of artists that are exclusively male. The dark gray, that doesn't appear to be coming out too well, is the percentage of mixed artists, and then the lightest shade is the percentage of all female artists. As you can see, across the 5 agencies, they're all significantly more male artists. 5 of the agencies, WME, UTA, and Paradigm, have more than 3 male artists for every female artist, whereas CA and Billions have more than 2 male artists for every female artist. Now, when you do the same thing by genre, you see very stark results. As you can see, pop across the 2 things is the only female majority category. Alternative being slightly more open to female artists, whereas electronic, hip-hop, and rock are almost exclusively male-dominated. That while all of the agencies maintain significantly more male clients, it is highly moderated by genre. Pop actually seems like a highly open genre to female artists, whereas other areas like rock and hip-hop seem to be very limited and almost exclusively male-focused. So, to answer the question on how it relates to the festival lineups, I have these figures. The figure in the middle is the one I showed you earlier in this presentation from Pitchfork's 2017 article. The square chart, they updated that article this year in 2018 with the current numbers. As you can see, the figure on the far left is one that I created from my research. If you compare the statistics, they're remarkably similar. That in 2017, the festival percentages of all male acts was 74. This year it was 70. My research perfectly bisects those numbers at 72%. And so my big conclusion there is the festivals are really no worse than the agencies. They are ordering off of a menu that is 72% male, and they're putting out a product that is between 74 and 70% male. So some of the takeaways and things you could actually apply this research to, including pop artists, definitely helps improve the gender balance of music festivals. As sort of a case in point with the success of Beyonce at Coachella this year, there are plenty of successful female pop artists that can do a really good job at festivals. That though they began as alternative and rock festivals, electronic and hip hop have really managed to create a niche for themselves within these festivals in a way that pop has not. So simply including more pop artists will help improve gender balance because of its female majority nature. That said, doing that would glance over core problems about female representation in genres that are already widespread at music festivals, like rock, electronic, and hip hop. That increasing female representation in those genres already present will also increase representation of female artists on music festival lineups. So, while it's clear that agencies and festivals maintain significantly more male artists, it is due to a wide-held public preference. To answer this question, I conducted a series of 4 experiments. Studies 1 and 2 were done with a rock music sample. Studies 3 and 4 were done with an electronic music sample. Now these 2 genres displayed some of the highest gender imbalances from the archival research, so we would expect the strongest results in these genres. Additionally, studies 1 and 3 used student participants who participated for extra credit. Studies 2 and 4 were done with a relatively good sample. They were generated through the Amazon Mechanical Turk or MTurk service, where users on the internet are paid small sums of money to complete surveys. So the participants were of varying ages, sexes, races, ages, and so you got a more representative sample than you would have just students. That said, I think students are actually a more viable sample for this research because so many of festival attendees are students that it serves as a good age group. Across the 4 studies, there were over 800 total participants, coming out to about 200 per study. So, for studies 1 and 2 on rock, an instrumental sample with a sweet guitar solo was played, and 1/3 of participants received this condition of an all-male band. Another 1/3 of participants were shown this photo of a mixed gender band. A final 1/3 of participants were shown this photo of an all-female band. And each condition, they rated the artists across five metrics. The hypothesis being, if there really was a preference for male artists, the male condition would be rated higher, even with the same sample, than the female artists. And as the results show, that simply wasn't the case. To interpret the results, we ran a one-way ANOVA on the results to compare the difference of means. We use a 0.05 significance level, so if you look at the far right column at the significance level, a result would be significant, meaning that there was a significant difference between how the samples were rated. If it was below 0.05, the only sample where that was the case was the skilled musicians metric for the first study. And there it was weird, it was the mixed condition that dropped it below. Male and female were not significantly different. And when we upscaled it in study 2, that difference was eliminated. In studies 3 and 4, we switched to an electronic music sample. And when we did that, we got very bizarre results in study 3 that I'll go into in a minute, which we think may be due to the specific photos we used. As you can see, there's maybe a higher energy vibe from the female DJ. She seems to be sort of flipping her hair around. It's got more energy than the male photo. So for study 4, to control for the effects of any one photo, we added 2 more photos to those conditions. So there were 6 different treatments across the 2 conditions. Again, judging the difference between male and female, hoping to mitigate the effects of any one photo. And when we did that, as you can see, we got different effects in study 3 and 4. Though there were some significant effects in study 3, when you actually compared the means, they were higher for the female DJ, the exact opposite of what you'd expect from the hypothesis. Given the 90% male nature of electronic music, having the female DJ as more popular was sort of stark. But when we controlled for the photos, as you can see from the chart for study 4, those were completely eliminated and the means were remarkably close. So in conclusion, I think the biggest takeaway from the research are festival lineups are essentially no worse in terms of gender balance than agency rosters. That there are thousands of shows played in thousands of venues by thousands of acts throughout the year. And we continue to frame this in the media as a music festival problem. And it really isn't. It's really an industry-wide problem that extends into all of these things. But because of the convenience sample hypothesis I laid out earlier, so much of the attention has been directed at the festivals when really it is a much, much deeper problem. My experience show that there is potential for success in female artists, that there was no evidence that the male artist was rated more highly. That said, I understand there are clear limitations to this type of research. You've got participants quickly clicking through a study as fast as they can. It's an instrumental sample. As was brought up in the previous panel, the role of voices is in no way measured in this study. Additionally, the way just listening to a 30-second sample and rating something is a very different experience from liking a band on Facebook, buying their tickets, really considering yourself a fan. That said, I take it as an indication that there is at least growing acceptance and on paper acceptance of female artists, even in traditionally male-dominated genres. Some areas for future research: what is the gender breakdown of acts looked at by the agencies? Is it possible that 60% of the acts that these agencies look at are female. And there's a bias inherent there where they're not selecting potential clients, female potential clients, at the same rate that they're selecting potential male clients. Or could it be that there are 99% male prospects and already they're selecting female artists at a greater rate? I don't have the answer to that question. I'm not sure the agencies would share that data, but I think it would be interesting to take it one step off the pipeline, that from festivals I've taken it to agencies, but what it looks like when it comes to the agencies I think is also a very good question. Some potential areas for future research that I came across while researching this was, to what degree do things as early as childhood impact this? That a lot of research has been done that the instruments students play as early as elementary school are highly gendered, that boys are much more likely to play the guitar or bang on the drums, whereas young girls are much more likely to be sort of channeled into piano or vocals. And one can imagine how 25 years down the line, when a third grader becomes a professional musician, how that channels females to become pop stars and males to become rock stars. Another question is, to what degree are gender identities and music identities related? A lot of the research, and it was sort of again brought up in the previous panel about belonging, when you think of what you like in a successful hip-hop artist or rock star, to what degree are those attributes also attributes that are traditionally associated with males? That when you think of the females that have found success in these genres, is it because they really open them up to be more accepting of attributes more associated with femininity, or is it because they walk the walk and talk the talk just like the boys? That it was drugs, sex, and rock and roll the same way it always has been. They just were able to do it the same way. That is my presentation. Absolutely honored to get to speak in front of all of you, especially right out of college. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions whatsoever. I'd be absolutely thrilled to talk with you.